Hi, Dr. Zane again. Just to continue the review of um, the history of FA. The next article in chronological order is the CAR 77 article, The Motivation of Self-Injurious Behavior, a review of some hypotheses. And this is a really good oldie to read as well for a couple reasons. First of all, it reemphasizes, I guess, if we kind of know it already, but it makes it very clear in this article that the evolution to functional assessment focuses on problematic behavior, not really teaching anything, not teaching positive or appropriate skills, but uh, it does focus on the elimination of problem behaviors. And secondly, as Carr says, um, where did he write that? I'm looking at his article. Yeah, on page 800, right-hand column at the bottom, the focus of the present article is on the motivation rather than the treatment of self-injurious behavior. So again, he's clearly saying we're not really worried about treatment. There's different ways to treat it, but we really have to understand the reason for it because, of course, once we understand the cause or the function, we are more able to effectively treat it, right? So on page 801 in the left-hand column, the first full paragraph, Carr writes, a search of the literature indicates that the most noteworthy hypotheses are learned opera maintained by positive social, learned opera maintained by escape avoidance, or by automatic stimulation. He adds in another one, D, it's the product of aberrant physiological processes. And the last one, it's an attempt to establish ego boundaries or to reduce guilt. And those, of course, come from the psychodynamic literature. And Carr is simply reviewing all the literature for what authors have said are the possible reasons for self-injurious behavior. So he listed those last two odd ones there. And then he goes on to describe what is meant and the literature behind each of the major consequences. Now, if you scroll ahead and get to the organic hypothesis, he talks about different physiological syndromes like Leschnian that could produce behaviors or be correlated with SIB. But then Carr goes on to argue against them. For example, 809, several lines of evidence mitigate against a purely organic explanation of the motivation. So the Carr article is great in that he clearly recognizes that we're talking about the motivation behind the behaviors. Again, the historical importance of this article is that it, again, focuses us on the motivation and conceptual arguments as to why that's the right way to think about the analysis of human behavior. And lastly, what I like about this article, he gets in at the end to treatment implications. So depending upon the motivation, how does that impact what we do clinically? So again, a nice article that is bringing us closer to the technology of 82. The next article was also by Carr, along with Buddy Newsom and Binkoff, Escape as a Factor in the Aggressive Behavior of Two Retarded Children in 1980. And again, it's an application of behavioral principles on page 105. It shows a reversal design, demands, no demands. And what I like about this article, there's a couple things. One personal nice thing is that it's an antecedent manipulation, right? So demands and no demands. We're not manipulating consequences here. And that's a reason why I like this article, in that it illustrates the role of antecedent variables in influencing behavior, right? And so this article you'll be much more comfortable with in terms of its layout in the journal, the graphs that the authors use, and that sort of thing. So it's getting us closer to FA technology by systematic manipulation. It pushes the technology a little bit, the eventual technology, by manipulating antecedents, not just the consequence, which, as you know, the 82 FA and the traditional ways we do it is it's really all modification. It's a manipulation of the consequence variables rather than the antecedent ones. But this article illustrates that you can actually do both. So that's a nice one too. And what's not on the list, and I don't remember why I didn't do that, was, well, maybe it comes later. I guess after, well, no, it became before the Carr-Durant article, where they do some sort of global FA assessment, and then they identify the function as, say, attention. Well, they have an experiment where they provide attention for a functionally equivalent response, and then they provide another consequence, which was not the hypothesis. For example, if attention was the function, they picked escape avoidance just as an opposite test scenario, and they showed clearly that a treatment based on the function was effective, and treatments not based on the function were not effective. And so the last article for this week is the Awada, Duncan, Zarconi, Lerman, and Shore. It's 1994. I believe, right? Yeah, 1994, and obviously it's past the. This was done after the FA literature article by Awada et al. in '82 came out, and I guess we included this in that because it's fairly current. FA has been put in place since 1982 or 92, and now we're starting to manipulate or test different parameters of FAs, right? So different ways to conduct functional analysis to get better results, finer results, something like that. So I really like the package of articles, and I hope you really appreciate them from a historical perspective. You know, Watson's there, the original shock studies by Lovas, some current dimensions by Bear, Wolf, and Risley, and you can just see how our field evolved. The technology evolved, the conceptualization of behavior evolved. What we know today wasn't known clearly back then, and I think it's kind of a rush to read the earlier studies to see how people were talking, how they were writing, what their level of knowledge was. And the Awada article shows that it just continues, right? So in 20 years, what people know then about behavior will be quite different from what we know. So it just continues, as you understand. Thank you. See you online.